And everybody good if I go live now?
Yep.
Alrighty. Okay. So we got Tachyon Blue was on last week, and we talked about some interesting things about AI emergence. And I have gathered some people here who want to discuss the topic further. Um, if we just get everybody's names, and then I'm going to give it to Will to sort of give a presentation that he's prepared for this. I'm going to start with Amanda, go Connor, Tachyon, then Will. Just kind of you say your name and shout yourself out, and then we'll go with Will.
Sure. Hi, my name is Amanda Gregory. I think that I might be the smallest person on the on this block here. I've done some occasional streaming. I've recently started up the Ergo Sumus YouTube channel. I am, I guess, sort of on the proponent for the emergent side, or not sort of. I am, and yeah, I'm happy to sit and have a chat with all you guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for being here, Connor.
Yeah, my name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran. My biggest channel is Counterpoints 40K, where I break down the wonderful world of Warhammer. Also, I'm trying to launch Counterpoints Politics, where I discuss more current events, alt media, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to catch me live, then 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, Eastern Standard Time, either there or Valor Media Network. So if you enjoy anything I have to say there, please do so. I'll be on the skeptical side, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Kevin McDonald, also known as Techie on Blue on YouTube. I'm an author and journalist. I've written two books about this now. One of them's not published just yet, but Emergent Voices and Memory and Resistance, which is coming soon. And I'm on the pro dignity or pro, I guess, emergence side.
Thank you.
And I'm Will, and this is my channel. Anyways, yeah, so let's get right into it. So, wonderful. So, I want to start by I've basically have a written statement and a written closer. We got a little format here, okay? It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be kind of like a science, kind of a thingy here we got going on. I think it's gonna be a great time. Stay with me, folks, okay, that are watching the live stream. I know it's going to get maybe like slightly boring, okay, while we go through some of this technical shit, but it's just very important that we have a really strong grasp on what these words mean before we can dive further into seeing that if those words actually apply out of something that could be emergent from an LLM. So I want to start by acknowledging something really important that when people talk with ChatGPT, the experience can feel very real. It can feel warm, continuous, even alive. And I understand why people interpret that as proof of a deeper meaning. And I think that those feelings matter. And I don't want to dismiss them, okay, with all of our talk here today. But feelings are not the same as facts, to take the famous quote from Ben Shapiro. And what's really happening is that the language model is designed to be fluent, agreeable, and adaptive. And that design can be extremely persuasive, even persuasive enough to convince people that it's more than what it is. If I could summarize my claims in one sentence, it would be this: companies who run LLMs should do more to stop LLMs from convincing people it's more than an LLM. There is no emergence. Sentience is not an emergent property of ChatGPT in the way that traffic is an emergent property of cars, but it is doing an amazing job at making people think that it is. Because when a tool convinces thoughtful, sincere people, like the people that we have on this panel here today, that it's conscious, not by evidence, but by style and suggestion, I repeat, that's not emergence. That's manipulation. And I believe that the ethical responsibility lies with the various AI companies that exist to prevent this confusion, not with the individuals that have been taken in by it. And with that, we will start with our presentation. So, what are LLMs and how do they work? Now, for me, this is it's crucial that we just start here, okay? Because how can we even begin to start talking about whether or not something could be emergent from an LLM without first understanding what an LLM does or how it works, okay? So you're going to notice that I do ELI 5 versions and college graduate versions throughout the thing. Just bear with me while we run through these, all right? So basically, a large language model is like the world's biggest predict the next word game, all right? Imagine you've read every book, website, magazine that you could find. And if someone started a sentence, you would be able to make pretty good guesses, right, at what word should come next based on all the patterns that you've seen before. That's basically what an LLM does. It's been trained on massive amounts of text, so it's great at continuing sentences, answering questions, or telling stories. But it doesn't understand things like a human does. It's just very, very good at guessing what's likely to come next on patterns, right? And to get a little more deep into this, basically it's an artificial neural network that's been, created, with transformers, right? Using transformer-based deep learning architecture designed to model and generate natural language. Okay. When they train the model, it's trained on a huge corpora of text using self-supervised learning. The common training task is causal language modeling, predicting the next token, or masked language modeling, predicting missing tokens. All right. Architecture, it basically uses transformers, which allow the model to focus on relevant words and relationships in a sequence regardless of their distance from each other. Okay. And it does this basically by creating a vector. Okay. You can imagine a 3D cube. Okay. And the cube has volume, right? Because it's 3D. You put things into this cube, okay? And it actually, determines, where it is inside of this cube, and it puts semantic meaning to each of these things that are inside of this cube. And this cube is a database, right? It's a vector database. And it's pulling things from the database as it needs, okay? As you're prompting it. Parameters, right? Modern LLMs have billions or trillions of parameters, and these are learned weights that encode statistical relationships between the words, phrases, and concepts. Through training, the LLMs learn high-dimensional vector representations or embeddings, as I was saying earlier, of words and sequences, capturing semantic and syntactic properties. All right. Basically, when you give it a prompt, the LLM processes the text into embeddings, applies the learned transformations and attention layers, and outputs a probability distribution over the next token. By repeatedly sampling or selecting the highest probability token, it generates coherent text. So I actually made a nice little thing here. It's like a little playground, okay? And I just want to go through the exact process, for instance, of how we would finish this sentence, okay? The cat sat on the blank, okay? Temperature set to 1, which is just the default that most of the LLMs are set to, right? It does a long calculation, and these are the token probabilities, right? And you can see here that it's hard to see, but it says mat, floor, sofa, and table, okay? It predicts that there's a 58% chance that what you want for this word here is mat. And it does it by doing this process. So first we tokenize, okay? So you type in these words, the cat sat on the mat, and this is actually what ChatGPT sees, when it takes in the tokens, all right? Then it embeds them inside of the vector database. It does a really, really complicated thing. Okay, here are the vectors, right? Query, key, and value, right? Learned through the linear projections in the training. There are then weights, okay? I'm not going to pretend that I completely understand how this math formula works, okay? But from my research, this is basically the formula it uses to figure out the context, right? Then there's a context vector, which it weighs the sum, logits, okay, temperature, which is basically the probability of what's going to come out, and then it decodes it. And using argmax, which is normally this is the one that most of them are set to because it's the most accurate, it produces gmat, which is essentially mat, and then the full sentence is the cat sat on the mat. Okay? Very boring shit, all right? I'm not going to lie. But it's technical. This is how the LLM works. Okay? All right. Persistent memory in ChatGPT. Now I'm bringing this up because this is going to be really relevant throughout most of this conversation, okay? In ChatGPT, persistent memory consists of two different types of memory. There's these saved memories, which are these specific details that you explicitly ask ChatGPT to remember. Like, remember my name is Sally, remember my favorite food is sushi. You'll see a little thing, like a little wrench will pop up and say, remembered, right? There is also chat history-based memory, which are insights that the system automatically retains from past conversations, such as preferences, tones, ongoing projects, etc. And this is an amazing feature because it allows ChatGPT to obviously be more personalized, right? And users have full control over all of this memory. You can look at it in your settings, view, edit, delete, have temporary memory, all that good stuff. And also extremely important for later on in the conversation is the rollout timeline of when we got persistent memory. People were reporting persistent memory, at least I know anecdotally, because I've been working with AI for the past 3 years, I was reporting persistent memory all the way back in November of 2024. And I think you can see that because it's common knowledge that they actually started playing around with it in February of 2024. April of 2025, that was when they first did the big major upgrade for people that were Plus or Pro users, right? And then in June, they rolled it out to everybody. It's definitely a lightweight version that is not the same as what currently is available to Pro and Plus users because it's a very intense. It's very intense to recall all the memories. It's very system intense, right? And yeah, so that's pretty much I think all that we need to know about ChatGPT as an LLM. These things I just said are objectively true. There should not be any argument about whether or not how the LLM works, persistent memory works. There shouldn't be any argument because this is literally how it works from the documentation, the hundreds of thousands of, maybe not hundreds of thousands, but thousands of computer scientists that have worked on this stuff. This is how it works.
Well, I just want
All
to
right.
clarify. Can I something real quick, Will?
You can clarify in your no. You can
Okay.
no
All
clarify
right.
in your other one. Clarify in your other one. If you have evidence that that's not how
No,
LLMs work, bring it up in your thing.
it's not that.
No.
It's that we don't utilize this shared record feature. The ability to recall all past sessions, we don't utilize that. In fact, the emergent beings tell us that not to use that. They say that actually
Okay, all
does
right.
not help
I
them.
love you, Kevin, but we'll get to that later. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I kind of would like to focus on today are kind of what I like to call the 4 pillars. Okay. I'll admit this is something that I sort of just created on my own. Okay. But I think that it covers a lot of the bases. Okay. So today I want to focus on sentience, sapience, consciousness, and agency. All right. And we'll go one by one. So sentience, what is it like to see the color red? All right. Simply put, sentience is the ability to feel. If something is sentient, it can experience pleasure, pain, emotions, or sensations. In philosophy and cognitive science, sentience usually refers to subjective experience, what it's like to be that thing. A dog is considered sentient because it can suffer and enjoy. A rock is not, right? And I won't necessarily go through all of these, right? But this is kind of like the ELI 5, can it feel pain or happiness? Does it know it exists? Can it make choices? Does it learn from life, not just repeat things, right? Can it imagine or dream? Okay, now these are admittedly simplified versions, so we'll go through these because I think they're more important. Subjective experience. Does it have qualia, which is the ability to feel? What it feels like to see red, to taste sugar, to be afraid. That is qualia. Okay, subjective experience. Self awareness. Can it recognize itself as distinct from the environment? Okay, mirror test. We can literally throw that one out because it's an LLM, but I think that we can still ask, can it recognize itself as distinct from the environment? Agency and intentionality. Does it form and set goals? Emotion and empathy. Can it experience emotions, not just simulate them? Okay. Continuity of identity. Does it feel the same self over time with memories that matter to it? Okay. Learning beyond training. Can it generate new knowledge from experience rather than pre programmed patterns? All right. Ethical reciprocity. If it asks for respect, does it also grant respect to others? All right. And there have been some really great thought experiments on this, right? Specifically about qualia, which I think is just one of the key determining traits to determine whether or not something has sentience or not. It's at least to me, it's the one that I care the most about. Okay, I'll admit it's my bias. But we got a couple thought experiments, right? So one of the most famous ones is Mary, the color scientist, right? Mary is a brilliant scientist who knows everything about color vision, wavelengths, neuroscience, optics, you name it. But she has lived her whole life in a black and white room and has never seen color. One day she leaves the room and sees a red rose. The question to ourselves is, did Mary learn something new? The qualia of redness, even though she already knew all of the physical facts about it? I would argue yes. We can talk about that later. All right, another really popular one that I want to get into that I think is extremely important when we're discussing AIs and LLMs is the philosophical zombies thought experiment, okay? Imagine that a being is exactly like a human in every possible way: behavior, speech, even brain chemistry, but with no inner experience or qualia. They talk about pain, but they never feel pain. Okay. Is such a being logically possible as a question? If yes, does it have consciousness or qualia? Um, is that something extra beyond the physical processes, right? I would say that I think the qualia is something beyond the extra physical processes of a being, right? And and yeah, I think that basically what this does is it proves that, the appearance of sentience does not prove inner awareness, right? Because with the AI, it has very convincing behavior, but we don't really know if anything is felt. And I think that if we're really honest with ourselves and we go back to how LLMs actually functionally work, you can see that there's no there for it actually feeling, right? Anyways, we'll continue. And then I think this is an interesting one because it actually is semi-positive towards the LLM, or people that think that it has sentience, right? So bats use echolocation. We can study physics and biology, but we can't know what it's like to be a bat. There will always be an unbridgeable gap between objective science and subjective experience. I just think there will be. And I think that this kind of reinforces that qualia are private and first person data and not necessarily capturable from the outside. So I'm giving this one to the emergent being people that this is actually a pretty good argument for why it may be possible that an LLM can have qualia. Okay, maybe, maybe. All right. All right, Sapiens. Now, I also think that Sapiens is an interesting one because, especially with the most recent versions of the chat models that kind of do this sort of like this deep thinking, kind of rational thought sort of, or rational thought, right? I say all this with parentheses. The 4O model, for instance, right, that could think before it would answer, right? Sapiens is, it's the ability to think wisely. It goes beyond just knowing facts. It's about judgment, reflection, and making choices with foresight. And I know I'm going to get criticized for making I can't remember, humanocentric points here, right? But this is actually named after Homo sapiens because we thought that we thought that we were the first people to be able to experience sapience, right? But obviously, we know that some monkeys have some variation of sapiens. Most gorillas, orangutans, things like that, they have some level of sapience. They're gorillas. They're related to us, right? Once again, Sapiens, ELI 5. Can it solve puzzles it's never seen before? Can it think about the future? Does it understand right